Chapters 45 to 50 of Dulcibel by Henry Peterson. This recording is in the public domain. Chapter 45. When Master Joseph arrived home, he told his wife of what a perverse course things had taken, amid his own and her frequent laughter; and then he could do nothing else than walk up and down impatiently, glancing at frequent intervals towards the road, to see if anybody were coming. In the course of an hour or so, nobody appearing, and Sweetbriar being sweetened up again by a good feed, he ordered the horse brought out. Then he was persuaded by his wife to recall the order, and wait patiently till sundown. "What impatient creatures you men are!" said Mistress Elizabeth with feminine superiority. "Doubtless he will be along. Give him sufficient time. Now, do not worry, husband mine, but take things patiently." So Master Joseph was induced to control his restlessness, and just as soon as he could have been reasonably expected, Master Raymond was seen riding up the lane at a light canter. "Hurrah!" cried Master Joseph, running to meet him. "And is it all over?" "We have smitten Ammon hip and thigh, from Aroer e'en till thou come to Minnith," answered Master Raymond, laughing. "It was you that kept the she wolf away, I know. How did you do it?" "Come in, and I will tell you all about it. And I want to hear how all went off in Salem." After a couple of hours' conversation, broken frequently by irresponsible bursts of laughter, the young men were mutually enlightened, and complimented each other upon the success with which they had worked out their respective schemes; while young Mistress Elizabeth complimented them both, thinking honestly in her innocent heart that two such wonderful young men certainly had never before existed. "How I should like to have seen you astonishing old Squire Hathorne!" said Master Joseph. "I am afraid you would have spoiled all by laughing," said his young wife. "You know you can never control your merriment, Joseph." "I cannot. You should have seen me preaching to Sister Ann this afternoon. I kept my face all the time as sober as a judge's. You know she had to take it all quietly. She could not even run away from it." "I would have given one of your £5 Massachusetts notes to see it," said Master Raymond, "and £5 more to see your brother Thomas stamping up and down the barroom of the Crown and Anchor, waiting for that Ipswich man to meet him." "I was very careful all through not to tell a direct falsehood," said Master Joseph. "It is bad enough to deceive people, without being guilty of downright lying." "Of course," replied Master Raymond. "I do not know that I told a downright lie either, all day, though I must admit that I acted a pretty big one. You must deal with fools according to their folly. You know we have Scripture for that." "I do not think I would have done it merely to save myself," said Master Joseph, evidently a little conscience smitten. "But to save you, my friend, that seems to be different." "And Dulcibel," added Master Raymond, "if I were imprisoned, what would become of her?" "Yes, I am glad I did it," responded his friend, regaining his confidence. "I have really hurt neither brother Thomas nor Sister Ann. On the contrary, I have prevented them from doing a great wrong. I am willing to answer for this day's work at the last day, and I feel certain that at least both of them will thank me for it." "I have no doubt of it," said Mistress Elizabeth, who herself brought up in the rigid Puritan school, had felt the same misgivings as her husband, but whose scruples were also removed by this last consideration. As for Master Raymond, he being more a man of the world, had felt no scruples at playing such a deceitful part. I am afraid that to save Dulcibel he would not have scrupled at open and downright lying; not that he had not all the sensitiveness of an honorable man as to his word, but because he looked upon the whole affair as a piece of malicious wickedness, in defiance of all just law, and which every true hearted man was bound to oppose and defeat by all means allowable in open or secret warfare. "I suppose you go back to Boston tomorrow?" said his host, as they were about to separate for the night. "Yes, immediately after breakfast. This affair is a warning to me, to push my plans to a consummation as soon as possible. I think I know what their next move will be. A shrewd man once said, 'Just think what is the wisest thing for your enemies to do, and provide against that.'" "What is it?" "Remove the Governor." "Why, I understand he was a mere puppet in the hands of the two Mathers." "He would be perhaps, but there is a Lady Phips." "Ah! The grey mare is the better horse, is she, as it is over at brother Thomas's?" "Yes, I think so. Now mark my prediction, friend Joseph. The first blow will be struck at Lady Mary. If Sir William resists, as I feel certain that he will, for he is, if not well educated, a thoroughly manly man, then he will be ousted from his position. You will note that it has been the same game all through, to strike at anyone, man or woman, who came between these vampires and their prey. I know only of one exception." "Ah, who is that?" "Yourself." Master Joseph smiled grimly. "They value their own lives very highly, friend Raymond, and know that to arrest me would be no child's play. Besides, Sweetbriar is never long unsaddled, and he is the fastest horse in Salem." "Yes, and to add to all that, you are a Putnam, and your wife is closely connected with Squire Hathorne." "There may be something in that," said his friend. "Yes, even Mistress Ann has her limits, which her husband, submissive in so many things, will not allow her to pass. But we are both a little tired, after such an eventful day. Good night." Chapter 46. While the foregoing conversation was taking place, one of a very different kind was passing between Mistress Ann and her worthy husband. He had gathered up all the particulars he could of the examination, and had brought them home to his wife for her instruction. After listening to all that he had to tell, with at least outward calmness, she said bitterly, "The whole thing was a trick, you see, to keep you and me away from Salem." "Do you think so? Do you think then that no man really wanted to see me at Ipswich?" "It is as plain as the nose on your face," replied his wife. "You were to be decoyed off to Ipswich, my horse sent out of the way, and then Joseph's madcap horse offered to me, they knowing well that the worthless creature would not behave himself with any woman on his back." "Oh pshaw, Ann, you do not mean that my simple hearted brother Joseph Putnam ever planned and carried out a subtle scheme of that kind?" said honest Thomas, with an older brother's undervaluation of the capabilities of a mere boy like Joseph. "I do not say that Joseph thought it all out, for very probable he did not. Doubtless that Master Raymond put him up to it, for he seems cunning and unprincipled enough for anything, judging by what you have told me of his ridiculous doings." "You may call them ridiculous, Ann, but they impressed everybody very much indeed. Dr. Griggs told me that he had no doubt whatever that an evil hand was on him." "Dr. Griggs is an old simpleton," said his wife crossly. "And even Squire Hathorne says that he never saw a stronger case of spectral persecution. Why, when one of the young men thrust the point of his rapier at the yellow bird, some of its feathers were cut off and came fluttering to the ground. Squire Hathorne says he never saw anything more wonderful." "Nonsense! It is all trickery." "Trickery? Why, my dear wife, the Squire has the feathers, and he means to send them at once to Master Cotton Mather by a special messenger, to confute all the scoffers and unbelievers in Boston and Plymouth." A scornful reply was at the end of his wife's tongue, but on second thought she did not allow it to get any further. Suppose that she did convince her husband and Squire Hathorne that they had been grossly deceived and imposed upon, and that Master Raymond's apparent afflictions and spectral appearance were the result of skilful juggling, what then? Would their enlightenment stop there? How about the pins that the girls had concealed around their necks and taken up with their mouths? How about Mary Walcott secretly biting herself, and then screaming out that good Rebecca Nurse had bitten her? How about the little prints on the arms of the afflicted girls, which they allowed were made by the teeth of little Dorcas Good, that child not 5 years old, and which Mistress Ann knew were made by the girls themselves. How could the bites and streaks and bruises, which she herself had shown as the visible proof that the spectre of good Rebecca Nurse, then lying in jail, was biting her and beating her with her chains, for Edward Putnam had sworn, "I saw the marks both of bite and chains." Perhaps it was safer to let Master Raymond's juggling go unexposed, considering that she herself and the "afflicted" girls had done so very much of it. Therefore she said, "I have no faith in Master Raymond, nevertheless, no more than Moses had in King Pharaoh's sorcerers, when they did the very same miracles before the king that he had done. I believe him now to be a cunning and very bad young man, and I think if I had been on the spot, instead of his being at this very moment, as I have very little doubt, over at brother's, where they are congratulating each other on the success of their unprincipled plans, Master Raymond would now be lying in Salem jail." "Probably you are correct, my dear," responded her husband meekly, "and I think it not unlikely that Master Raymond may have thought the same, and planned to keep you away. But it was evident to me, that if the afflicted girls had taken one side or the other in the matter, it would not have been yours. Why, even our own daughter Ann was laughing and joking with him when I entered the court room." "Yes," said his wife disdainfully, "that is girl nature all over the earth. Just put a handsome young man before them, who has seen the world, and is full of his smiles and flatteries and cajolements, and the wisest of women can do nothing with them. But the cold years bring them out of that," she added bitterly. "They find what they call love is a folly and a snare." Her husband looked out of the window into the dark night, and made no reply to this outburst. He had always loved his wife, and he thought when he married her that she loved him. Although he was an excellent match, so far as property and family were concerned, still she would occasionally talk in this way, and he hoped and trusted that it did not mean much. "I think myself," he said at length, "that it is quite as much as the pretty gifts he has made them, and has promised to send them from England, as his handsome face and pleasant manners. Of course, it all goes together. They are a set of mere giggling girls, and that is all you can make of them; and our daughter Ann is as bad as any of the lot. I wish she did not take so much after your family, Thomas." This roused her husband a little. "I am sure, Ann, that our family are much stronger and healthier than your own are. And as to Ann's being like the other girls, I wish she was. She is about the only delicate and nervous one among them." "Well, Thomas, if you have got at last upon that matter of the superiority of the Putnams to everybody else in the Province, I think I should go to bed," retorted his wife. "That is the only thing that you are thoroughly unreasonable about. But I do not think you ever had a single minister, or any learned scholar in your family, or ever owned a whole island in the Merrimac River, as my family, the Harmons, always have done, since the country was first settled, and probably always shall, for the next 500 years. To this Thomas Putnam had no answer. He knew well that he had no minister and no island in his family; and those two things, in his wife's estimation, were things that no family of any reputation should be without. He had not brought on a discussion, although his wife had accused him of doing so, and had only asserted what he thought the truth in stating that the Putnams were the stronger and sturdier race. "I do not wish to hurt your feelings, Thomas, in reminding you of these things," continued his wife, finding he was not intending to reply. "I will admit that your family is a very reputable and worthy one, even if it is not especially gifted with intellect like the Harmons, else you may be sure that I should not have married into it. But I have a headache, and do not wish to continue this discussion any longer, as it is unpleasant to me, and besides in very bad taste." And so, taking the hint, Master Putnam, like a dutiful husband who really loved his somewhat peevish and fretful wife, acknowledged by his silence in the future that the Harmons were more superior to any family that could not boast of possessing a minister and an island, the latter for 500 years. Chapter 47. When Master Raymond returned to Boston, he found that an important event had taken place in his absence. Captain Alden and Master Philip English and his wife had all escaped from prison and were nowhere to be found. How Captain Alden had managed things with the jailer, this young man was not able to ascertain, probably however by a liberal use of money. As for Master English and his wife, they were, as I have already said, at liberty in the daytime, under heavy bonds, and had nothing to do but walk off some time between sunrise and sundown, as Master English's ship, the Porcupine, had been lying for a week or two in Boston harbor, and left with a brisk northwest wind early in the morning of the day when they were reported missing. It was not difficult for anyone to surmise as to their mode of escape. As to Captain Alden, he might or might not have gone with them. As was natural, there was a good deal of righteous indignation expressed by all in authority. The jailer was reprimanded for his carelessness in the case of Captain Alden, and warned that if another prisoner escaped, he would forfeit his, of late, very profitable position, and the large properties of both gentlemen were attached and held as being subject to confiscation. But while the magistrates and officials usually were in earnest in these proceedings, it was generally believed that the Governor, influenced by Lady Mary, had secretly favored the escaping parties. The two ministers of South Church, Masters Willard and Moody, were also known to frequently visit the Captain and Master English in their confinement, and to have expressed themselves very freely in public, relative to the absurdity of the charges which had been made against them. Master Moody had even gone so far as to preach a sermon on the text, "When they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another," which was supposed by many to have a direct bearing on the case of the accused. And it is certain that soon afterwards the Reverend Master Moody found it expedient to resign his position in South Church and go back to his old home in Portsmouth. Anxious to learn the true inwardness of all this matter, Master Raymond called a few days after his return to see Lady Mary. Upon sending in his name, a maid immediately appeared, and he was taken as before to the boudoir, where he found her ladyship eagerly awaiting him. "And so you are safely out of the lines then, Master Raymond," she said, laughing. "I heard you had passed through securely." The young man smiled. "Yes, thanks to Providence, and to a good friend of mine in Salem." "Tell me about it," said the lady. "I have the magisterial account already, I now wish to have yours." "Will your ladyship pardon me if I ask a question first? I am so anxious to hear about Mistress Dulcibel. Have you seen her lately? And is she well?" "As well and as blooming as ever. The keeper and his wife treat her very kindly, and I think would continue to do so, even if the supply of British gold pieces were to fail. By the way, she might be on the high seas now, or rather in New York, if she had so chosen." "I wish she had. Why did she not go with them?" "Because your arrest complicated things so. She would not go and leave you in the hands of the Philistines." "Oh, that was foolish." "I think so too, but I do not think that you are exactly the person to say so," responded the lady, a little offended at what seemed a want of appreciation of the sacrifice that Dulcibel had made on his account. But Master Raymond appeared not to notice the rebuke. He simply added, "If I could have been there to counsel her, I would have convinced her that I was in no serious danger; for even if imprisoned, I do not think there is a jail in the province that could hold me." "Well, there was a difficulty with the keeper also, for she had given her word, you know, not to escape when she was taken into his house." "But Captain Alden had also given his word. How did he manage it?" "I don't know," replied the lady; "but to a hint dropped by Dulcibel, the jailer shook his head resolutely, and said that no money would tempt him." "The difficulty in her case then remains the same as ever," said the young man thoughtfully, and a little gloomily. "She might go into the prison, but that would be to give warning that she had planned to escape. Besides, it is such a vile place, that I hate the idea of her passing a single night in one of its sickening cells." "Perhaps I can wring a pardon out of Sir William," said the young lady, musing. "Oh, Lady Mary, if you only could, we should both forever worship you." The lady smiled at the young man's impassioned language and manner. He looked as if he would throw himself at her feet. "I should be glad to do it, but Sir William just now is more rigid than ever. He had a call yesterday from his pastor, Master Cotton Mather, and a long talk from him about the witches. Master Mather, it seems, has had further evidence, and of the most convincing character, of the reality of those spectral appearances." "Indeed?" said Master Raymond, showing great interest, for he had an idea of what was coming. "Yes. In a recent examination at Salem before Squire Hathorne, a young man struck with his sword at a spectral yellow bird which was tormenting an afflicted person, and several small yellow feathers were cut off by the thrust and floated down to the floor. Squire Hathorne writes to Master Mather that he would not have believed it if he had not seen it, but as it was, he would be willing to take his oath before any court in Christendom, that this wonderful thing really occurred." Master Raymond could not help laughing. "I see you have no more faith in the story than I have," continued Lady Mary. "But it had a great effect upon Sir William, coming from a man of such wonderful learning and wisdom as Master Cotton Mather, especially as he said that he had seen the yellow feathers himself, which had since been sent to him by Squire Hathorne, and which had a singular smell of sulphur about them." The young man broke into a heartier laugh than before. Then he said scornfully, "It seems to me that no amount of learning, however great, can make a sensible man out of a fool." "Why, you know something about this then? Did it happen while you were in Salem?" "I know everything about it," said Master Raymond. "I am the very man that worked the miracle." And he proceeded to give Lady Mary a detailed account of the whole affair, substantially as it is known to the reader. "By the way, as to the feather smelling of sulphur," concluded the young man, "I think that is very probable, inasmuch as I observed the jailer's wife that very morning giving the younger chickens powdered brimstone to cure them of the pip." "I think you are a marvellously clever young man," was the lady's first remark, as he concluded his account. "Thank your ladyship," replied Master Raymond, smiling. "I hope I shall always act so as to deserve such a good opinion. I would have given my gold cup, which of the Duke of Albemarle gave me, to have been there, especially when the yellow bird's feathers came floating down to Squire Hathorne's reverential amazement," said Lady Mary, laughing heartily. "You must come up here tomorrow morning at noon. Master Mather is to bring his feathers to show the Governor, and to astound the Governor's skeptical wife. You are not afraid to come, are you?" "I shall enjoy it very much. That is, if the Governor will promise that I shall not suffer for my disclosures. I am free now, and I do not wish to be arrested again." "Oh, I will see to that. The Governor will be so curious to hear your story, that he will promise all that you desire as to your safety. Besides, you will not be sorry to take down Master Mather a little. These Puritan ministers presume on their vocation too much. They all think they are perfectly capable of governing not only provinces but kingdoms, while the whole history of the world proves their utter incapacity to govern even a village wisely." "That is true as the gospel, Lady Mary. But one thing I have always noticed, that while every minister thinks this, he would himself far rather be governed even by one of the world's people than by a minister of any other belief than his own. So you see they really do think the same as we do about it, only they do not always know it." "You are a bright young man," Lady Mary replied pleasantly, "and I think almost good enough to wear such a sweet rose next your heart as Mistress Dulcibel." CHAPTER 38. That evening, as Master Raymond was standing in the bar room of the Red Lion, Captain Tolley came in, and after tossing off a stout glass of rum and water, went out again, giving the young Englishman a nod and the agreed upon signal, a smothering of his black beard with the left hand. After the lapse of a few minutes, Master Raymond followed, going towards the wharves, which in the evening were almost deserted. Arrived at the end of one of the wharves, he found the captain of the Storm King. "So you got out of the clutches of those Salem rascals safely?" said the captain. "I was afraid I should have to go all the way to Salem for you." "You would not have deserted me then, captain?" "That is not of the kind of a marlinspike I am," replied the captain quaintly. "I'd have got you out of Salem jail, unless it is a good deal stronger than the Boston one." "Thank you, captain, but I am glad there was no need of your trying." "You heard of course that Captain Alden was off, and Master and Mistress English?" "Yes, and very glad I was too." "Why did not your sweetheart go with the Englishes?" "There were several reasons. One, a rather foolish one, she would not leave me in prison." "She would not?" "No." "Damn me! Why that girl is fit to be a sailor's wife. When we get her off safely, I intend to have her as the figurehead of the Storm King." "I am afraid that would be a very unhealthy position. She might catch a bad cold," replied Master Raymond. "Of course, I mean in wood, painted white, with red cheeks," said Captain Tolley. "It brings good luck to have a fine woman for a figurehead. Pleases old Nep, you know." "But we must get her off first," rejoined Master Raymond. "Now to keep out of that hateful jail. She has given her word to Keeper Arnold not to escape. You know she cannot break her word." "Of course not," replied the captain. "A lady is like a sailor, she cannot go back on her promise." "And there is where the trouble comes in." "Buy Keeper Arnold over." "I am afraid I cannot not for a good while at least. They are all down upon him for Captain Alden's escape. They might give him a terrible whipping, if another prisoner got off." The captain shrugged his shoulders. "Yes, I saw them whip some Quakers once. It was not a good, honest lash, but something the hangman had got up on purpose, and which cut to the very bone. I have seen men and women killed, down on the Spanish Main, but I never saw a sight like that. Good, harmless men and women too, a little touched here, you know," and the captain tapped his forehead lightly with his forefinger. "Yes, I should not like to hear that Master Arnold had been tortured like that on our account." "Suppose we carry her off some night by force, she having no hand in the arrangements? She can even refuse to go, you know, if she pleases. We will handle her as gently as a little bird, and you can come up and rescue her if you choose, and knock down 2 or 3 of us. How would that do? Half a dozen of the Storm King's men could easily do that. Choose a night with a brisk northwester, and we would be past the castle's guns before the sleepy landlubbers had their eyes open." Master Raymond shook his head dubiously. "I do not like it, and yet I suppose it must do, if nothing better can be found. Of course, if we carry her off bodily against her will, it would neither be a breaking of her pledge, nor expose Keeper Arnold to any danger or after punishment, though he might perhaps get pretty seriously hurt in resisting us, and she would not much like that." "I suppose then we must wait a while longer," said the captain. "I am ready any time you say the word. Only be careful that a good west or a nor'west wind is blowing. When once out on the high seas, we can take care of ourselves." "Many French privateers out there?" "Thick as blackberries, but they are of no account. Those we cannot fight we can easily run away from. There is no craft on these seas that can overhaul the Storm King." With a hearty shake of the hand, the two parted, the captain for the vessel of which he was so proud, Master Raymond for his room in the Red Lion. Chapter 49. The next day, a little before noon, Master Raymond knocked at the door of the Governor's mansion, and was at once conducted to Lady Mary's boudoir. "The Reverend Master Mather is already with the Governor," said her ladyship, "and I expect to receive a summons to join them every moment. and in fact the words were hardly out of her mouth when Sir William's private secretary, Master Joslin, appeared with a request for her ladyship's presence. "Come with me," she said to Master Raymond, "but do not say anything, much less smile or laugh, until I call upon you for your testimony." As they entered, the courteous governor handed his lady to a seat on the sofa, and Master Mather made a dignified obeisance. "I have brought along a young friend of mine, who was with me, and would also like to hear all of these wonderful things," said her ladyship. And Master Raymond bowed very deferentially to both the high dignitaries, they returning the bow, while Sir William politely requested him to be seated. "I was just on the point of showing to Sir William the most remarkable curiosities of even this very remarkable era, and he suggested that you also doubtless would like to see them," said the minister, at this time a man of about 30 years of age. He was rather a comely and intelligent looking man, and Master Raymond wondered that one who appeared so intellectual should be the victim of such absurd hallucinations. Lady Mary bent her head approvingly in answer to the minister. "I should like it very much to see them," she replied courteously, and Master Mather continued: "In the work I have been preparing on the wonders of the invisible world, several of the sheets of which I have already shown to Sir William, I have collected many curious and wonderful instances. Thus in the case of the eldest daughter of Master John Goodwin, whom I took into my own house in order that I might more thoroughly investigate the spiritual and physical phenomena of witchcraft, I found that while the devils that tormented her were familiar with Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, they seemed to have very little knowledge of the various Indian dialects." "That certainly is very curious," replied Sir William, "inasmuch as those heathen are undeniably the children of the devil, as all our wisest and most godly ministers agree." "Yes," continued the minister, "it is true, and that makes me conjecture that these devils were in fact only playing a part, to deceive me into thinking that the red heathen around us were not really the children of Satan, as they undoubtedly are." "I think that the most reasonable view," responded the Governor. "As to the reality of this new assault by Satan upon this little seed of God's people in the new world," continued Master Mather fervently, "I have now no doubt whatever. Proof has been multiplied upon proof, and the man or woman who does not by this time believe, is simply one of those deplorable doubters, like Thomas, who never can be convinced. For my part, I consider witchcraft the most nefandous high treason against the Majesty on high, and the principal design of my book is to manifest its hideous enormity, and to promote a pious thankfulness to God that justice so far is being inflexibly executed among us." Lady Mary's face flushed a little, for she saw the drift of the minister's censure. It was well known in all the inner circles that she had neither faith in the reality of witchcraft, nor the least sympathy with the numerous prosecutions, and the inflexible justice which the minister lauded. The Governor knew his wife's temper, and hastened to say: "Still we must admit, Master Mather, that some persons with tender conscience require more convincing proofs than do others; and therefore I was anxious that Lady Mary should see these feathers you spoke of, cut from the wings of one of those yellow birds which appear to be used so frequently as familiars by the Salem witches." "Oh yes, I had forgotten them for a moment." And putting his hand into his breast pocket, Master Mather produced a small box, which he opened carefully, and called their attention to a couple of small yellow feathers placed on a piece of black cloth within. "I would not take £100 for these spectral feathers," said the minister exultingly. "They are the only positive proof of the kind, now existing in the whole world. With these little feathers I shall dash out the brains of a host of unbelievers, especially of that silly caliph, or caitiff, who is all the time going around among the merchants, wagging his vile tongue against me." Sir William and Lady Mary had been looking upon the feathers very curiously. At last Lady Mary gave a low incredulous laugh. Her husband looked at her inquiringly. "They are nothing but common chicken feathers, which could be picked up in any barnyard," she said scornfully. "Your ladyship is very much mistaken. You never saw chicken feathers like those," said the minister, his face now also flushing. "Who was the yellow bird afflicting when these feathers were cut?" the lady asked. "A young man was on his examination for witchcraft, Squire Hathorne writes me; but he was found to be himself a victim, and was released; which proves, by the way, how careful the worshipful magistrates are in Salem, lest any who are innocent should be implicated with the guilty. The young man began to cry out that an evil hand was on him, and that a yellow bird was trying to peck out his eyes, whereupon one of the bystanders pulled out his rapier and smote at the spectral bird, when these feathers were cut off, becoming visible of course as soon as they were detached from the bird and its evil influence. It is one of the most wonderful things that I ever heard of." And Master Mather gazed on the feathers with admiring and almost reverential eyes. "Sir William," said his lady, "you have, I hope, a little common sense left, if these Massachusetts ministers and magistrates have all gone crazy on this subject. You know what a chicken is, if they do not. And are those simply chicken feathers?" "Why, my dear," replied the Governor, wriggling in his great armchair, "I grant that they certainly do look like chicken feathers; but then, you know, the yellow bird the witches use may have feathers like unto a chicken's." "Nonsense!" replied Lady Mary. "None are so blind as those that will not see. I suppose that if I were to bring that afflicted young man here, and he were to acknowledge that the whole thing was a trick got up by him to save his life, you would not believe him." "Indeed I should," replied Sir William. "Yes, Lady Mary, find the young man and question him yourself," said Master Mather. "None are so certain as those that have never informed themselves. I have made inquiry into these marvelous things. I even took that afflicted girl, as I have told you, into my own house, in order to inform myself of the truth. When you have investigated the matter to 1/10 the extent that I have, you will be prepared to give a reasonable opinion as to its truth or falsehood. Until then, some modesty of statement would become a lady who sets up her crude opinion against all the ministers and the magistrates of the land." This was a tone which the leading ministers of that day among the Puritans did not hesitate to take, even where high dignitaries were concerned, and Master Mather had the highest ideas of the privilege of his order. "Then I suppose, Master Mather, that if the afflicted young man himself should testify that these feathers were simply chicken feathers that he had artfully thrown up into the air, you would not acknowledge that he had deceived you?" "If such an impossible thing could happen, though I know not that it could, of course I should be compelled to admit that Squire Hathorne and 100 others, who all saw this marvelous thing plainly in open day, were deceived by the trick of an unprincipled mountebank and juggler." "I shall hold both you and Sir William to your word," replied Lady Mary emphatically. Then turning to the young Englishman, who had remained entirely silent so far, paying evident attention to all that was spoken, but giving no sign of approval or disapproval, she said, "Master Raymond, what do you think of this matter?" Master Raymond rose from his chair and stepped a pace or two forward. Then he said, "If I answer your ladyship's question freely, it might be to my own hurt. Having had my head once in the lion's mouth, I am not anxious to put it there again." The lady looked significantly at Sir William. "Speak out truly, and fear nothing, young man," said the Governor. "Nothing that you say here shall ever work you injury while I am Governor of the Province." "What do you wish to know, Lady Mary?" "You, I believe, were the afflicted young man to whom Master Mather has referred." Master Raymond bowed. "Was there any reality in those pretended afflictions?" "Only a bad cold to begin with," said the young man smiling. "How about the yellow bird?" "It was all a sham. I dealt with credulous and dangerous fools according to their folly." "How about those feathers?" "They are feathers I got from the wings of one of the Salem jailer's chickens." Sir William laughed. How about the smell of sulphur which Squire Hathorne and Master Mather have detected in the feathers?" "I think it very probable, as I observed Goodwife Foster that morning giving her chickens powdered brimstone for the pip." Here the Governor laughed loudly and long, until Master Mather said indignantly, "I am sorry, Sir William, that you can treat so lightly this infamous confession of falsehood and villainy. This impudent young man deserves to be set for 3 days in the pillory, and then whipped at the cart's tail out of town." "Of course it is a very shameful piece of business," replied the Governor, regaining his gravity; "but you know, that as the confession has been made only on the promise of perfect immunity, I cannot, as a man of my word, suffer the least harm to come to the young person for making it." "Oh, of course not," said the minister, taking up his hat, and preparing to leave the room; "but it is scandalous scandalous! All respect for the magistracy and authority seems to be fading out of the popular mind. I consider you a dangerous man a very dangerous young man." This last, of course, to Master Raymond. "And I consider you tenfold more dangerous with your clerical influence, and credulity, and superstition," replied the young Englishman hotly. Being of good family, he was not inclined to take such insults mildly. "How dare you, with your hands all red with the blood of 20 innocent men and women, talk to me about being dangerous?" "Peace!" said Sir William with dignity. "My audience chamber is no place to quarrel in." "I beg your Excellency's pardon," said Master Raymond humbly. "One moment before you go," said Lady Mary, stepping in front of the minister. "I suppose you will be as good as your word, Master Mather, and admit that with all your wisdom you were entirely mistaken." "I acknowledge that Squire Hathorne and myself have been grossly deceived by an unprincipled adventurer. But that proves nothing. Because Jannes and Jambres imitated with their sorceries the miracles of Moses, did it prove that Moses was an impostor? There was one Judas among the 12 apostles, but does that invalidate the credibility of the 11 others, who were not liars and cheats? It is the great and overwhelming burden of the testimony which decides in this as in all other disputed matters, not mere isolated cases. Good afternoon, madam. I will see you soon again, Sir William, when we can have a quiet talk to ourselves." "Stay!" cried Lady Mary, as the offended minister was stalking out of the room. "You have forgotten something," and she pointed to the little box containing the chickens' feathers, which had been left lying upon the table. The minister gave a gesture expressive of mingled contempt and indignation, but did not come back for it. It was evident that he valued the feathers now at considerably less than £100. "Young man," said the Governor, smiling, "you are a very bright and keen-witted person, but I would advise you not to linger in this province any longer than is absolutely necessary. Master Mather is much stronger here than I am." Chapter 50. The next morning a note came to Master Raymond from Joseph Putnam, brought by one of the farm hands. It was important. Abigail Williams had called upon Goodwife Buckley, and told her in confidence that it was in confrontation that she had learned from Ann Putnam to bring Dulcibel Burton back to Salem jail again. The escape of Captain Alden and the Englishes from the Bridewell in Boston had caused a doubt in Salem as to its security. Besides, Lady Phips had taken ground so openly against the witch prosecutions, that there was no knowing to how great an extent she might not go to aid any prisoner in whom she took an interest. Abigail Williams further said that Mistress Ann Putnam had become very bitter both against her brother-in-law Joseph and his friend Master Raymond. She was busy combating the idea that the latter really ever had been afflicted, and was endeavoring to rouse Squire Hathorne's indignation against him as being a deceiver. As the young man read this last, he wondered what effect would be produced upon the credulous magistrate, when he received word from Master Mather as to what had occurred in the Governor's presence. Would he be so angry as to take very arbitrary measures, or so ashamed as to let it all pass, rather than expose the extent to which he had been duped? He feared the former, knowing in which way Mistress Ann Putnam's great influence with him would be directed. Master Joseph advised immediate action. If peaceable means would not serve, then the use of violent ones. If Captain Tolley could not find among his sailors those who would undertake the job, he, Master Joseph, would come down any night with 3 stout men, overpower the keepers, and carry off Mistress Dulcibel with the requisite amount of violence to keep her promise unbroken. Master Raymond wrote a note in return. He was much obliged for the information. It was evident that the time had come for action, and that it was dangerous to delay much longer. Of course, peaceable means were to be preferred, and it was possible he might be able either to bribe the keeper or to get a release from the Governor; but if force had to be resorted to, Captain Tolley could command his whole crew for such a service, as they were the kind of men who would like nothing better. In fact, they would not hesitate to open fire upon the town if he ordered it, and even run up the flag of a French privateer. After dispatching this business, Master Raymond went down on the porch of the Red Lion, and began an examination of the clouds and the weathercocks. It had been raining slightly for a day or two, with the wind from the southeast; but though the vanes still pointed to the southeast, and the light lower clouds were moving from the same point of the compass, he caught glimpse through the scud of higher clouds that were moving in an entirely opposite direction. "How do you make it out?" said a well known voice. He had heard some one approaching, but had supposed it to be a stranger. "I am not much of a sailor, but I should say it would clear up, with a brisk wind from the west or the northwest by afternoon." "Aye," said Captain Tolley, for it was he, "and a stiff nor'wester by night; if it isn't, I'll give my head for a football. Were I bound out of the harbor, I would not whistle for a better wind than we shall have before 6 hours are over." Master Raymond glanced around. No one was near them. "Are you certain of that, Captain? Would it do to bet upon?" "You may bet all you are worth, and your sweetheart into the bargain," replied the Captain, laughing with a significant look out of his eyes. "When are you going, Captain?" "Oh, tonight perhaps, if I can get all my livestock on board." "To-night then let it be," said the young man in a whisper. "By fair means or by foul. I may succeed by fair means, have a boat waiting at the wharf for me. It will be light enough to get out of the harbor." "There is a gibbous moon, plenty. Once past the castle and we are safe, we can easily break open the keeper's house, and quiet him with a pistol at his head." "You must not harm him. He has been a good friend to her." "Of course, only scare him a little. Besides, he is not a good friend if he makes a noise." "Well, I will see you by 10 o'clock, with her or without her. Yes, I will bet you a gold piece, Captain, that the wind gets around to the west by 4 o'clock." This last was in Master Raymond's usual tones, the previous conversation having been in whispers. "You will be safe enough in that, Master Raymond," said the landlord of the Red Lion, whose steps the Englishman had heard approaching. "Do you think so? I do not want to take the young man's money. He is only a landsman, you know, mate. But I will bet you a piece of 8 that the wind will not get around till a half hour after that time, and we will take it all out in drinks at your bar at our leisure." "Done," said the landlord. "And now let's go in and take a drink all around in advance." End of chapters 45 to 50. Chapters 51 to 54 of Dulcibel by Henry Peterson. This recording is in the public domain. Chapter 51. Master Raymond's next proceeding was to call on Lady Phips, sending in his name with a request to see her ladyship on very important business. He was ushered as usual into her boudoir. "I must be doing something, Lady Mary," he said, after a few words relative to the evident change of weather. "I have news from Salem that the magistrates are about to send Mistress Dulcibel back to Salem jail." "That is sad," she answered. "And besides, there is no knowing what new proceedings they may be concocting against me. I must take Sir William's advice and get out of this hornet's nest as soon as possible." "Well, what can I do for you?" "Get an order from Sir William releasing Dulcibel from prison." "Oh, that I could! God knows how gladly I would do it." "You can at least try," said Master Raymond desperately. The lady hesitated a moment. "Yes, as you say, I can at least try. But you know how impossible it is to carry on the government of this province without the support of the ministers and the magistrates. Sir William is naturally anxious to succeed, for if he fails here it will block his road to further preferment." "And he will allow the shedding of innocent blood to go on, in order to promote his own selfish ambition?" said the young man indignantly. "You are unjust to the Governor. He will do all he can to moderate this fanaticism, and, if it comes to the worst, he will order a general jail delivery, and meet the consequences. But he hopes much from time, and from such developments as those of your chicken feathers." And the lady smiled at the thought of the minister's discomfiture. "Some things can wait, but I cannot wait," insisted Master Raymond. "You must acknowledge that." "Sir William starts this afternoon on a visit to Plymouth, to remain for a day or so; but I will have a talk with him and see what I can do," replied the lady. "Call here again at 6 o'clock this evening." "Such beauty and spirit as yours must be irresistible in the cause of virtue and innocence," said the young man, rising to depart. "No flattery, Master Raymond. I will do all I can without that." But Lady Mary, being still a very comely woman, as she certainly was a very spirited one, was not much displeased at the compliment, coming from such a handsome young man as Master Raymond. Eulogy that the hearer hopes embodies but the simple truth, is always pleasant alike to men and women. It is falsehood and not truth that constitutes the essence of flattery. The day dragged on very drearily and slowly to Master Raymond. The waiting for the hour of action is so irksome that even the approach of danger is a relief. But patience will at least weary out the slowest hours, and punctually at 6 o'clock the young man stood again at the door of the Governor's mansion. Lady Mary evidently was expecting him, for he was shown in at once. She looked up wearily as he entered. "I can do nothing today," she said. "What ground did the Governor take?" "That sound policy forbade him to move in the matter at present. The persecuting party were very indignant at the escape of Captain Alden and the Englishes, and now for him to grant a pardon to another of the accused would be to irritate them to madness." Master Raymond acknowledged to himself the soundness of the Governor's policy, but he only said, "Then it seems that Dulcibel must go back to Salem prison, and I run a good chance of going to prison also, as a self confessed deceiver and impostor." "If she were released, could you both get away from Boston at once?" Master Raymond's voice sank to a whisper. "I have all my plans arranged. By the third hour after midnight we shall be where we can snap our fingers at the magistrates of Boston." "I have been thinking of a plan. It may work, or it may not, but it is worth trying." The young man's face lightened. "You know that England is ruled by William and Mary. Why should not the province of Massachusetts also be?" "I do not understand you." "Upon leaving Sir William, I was somewhat indignant that he would not grant my request; and to pacify me, he said he was sorry that I had not the same share in the government here that Queen Mary had at home, and then I could do more as I pleased." Still Master Raymond's face showed that he was puzzled to catch her meaning. She laughed and rose from her chair, the old resolute expression upon her spirited face, and opening the door into the next room, which was the Governor's private office, she said, "Come here a moment, Master Josslyn." The private secretary entered. "Prepare me," she said to the secretary, "the proper paper to be signed by the Governor, ordering Keeper Arnold to release at once Mistress Dulcibel Burton from confinement in the Boston bridewell." "But the Governor, you know, is absent, Lady Mary," said the secretary, "and his signature will be necessary." "Oh, I will see to that," replied the lady a little haughtily. Master Raymond sat quietly, waiting for what was to come next. He could not conceive how Lady Mary intended to manage it. As for the lady, she tapped the table with her shapely fingers impatiently. In a few minutes Master Josslyn reappeared with the paper. "All it wants now is the signature of the Governor," he said. The lady took up a pen from the table by which she was sitting, and filled it with ink. Then with a firm hand she signed the paper, "William Phips, Governor, by Lady Mary Phips." "But your ladyship, the keeper will not acknowledge the validity of that signature, or obey it," said Master Josslyn in some alarm. "He will not? We shall see," responded her ladyship rising. "Order my carriage, Master Josslyn." In 15 minutes Lady Mary, accompanied by Master Raymond, was at Keeper Arnold's house. "I bring you good news, Master Arnold," said Lady Mary. "I know you will rejoice, such a tender hearted man as you are, at the release of Mistress Dulcibel Burton. Here is the official document." She flourished it at him, but still kept it in her hand. Dulcibel was soon informed of the good news, and came flying out to meet her benefactor and her lover. "Put on a shawl and your veil at once, and make a bundle of your belongings," said Lady Mary, kissing her. "Master Raymond is in a great hurry to carry you off, at which I confess that I do not wonder." Dulcibel tripped off. The sooner she was out of that close place the better. "Well, what is it, Master Arnold?" said Lady Mary to the keeper, who acted as if he wished to say something. "It is only a form, my lady. But you have not shown me the Governor's warrant yet." "Why, yes, I have," said Lady Mary, fluttering it at him as before. But Keeper Arnold was fully aware of the responsibility of his position, and putting out his hand, he studied the fluttering paper sufficiently to glance over its contents. When he came to the signature his face paled. "Pardon me, my lady, but this is not the Governor's writing." "Of course it is not. Why, you silly loon, how could it be when he has gone to Plymouth? But you will perceive that it is in Master Joslyn's writing, and the Governor ought to have signed it before he started." "This is hardly a regular form, my lady." "It is not. Do you not see the Governor's name, and there below it is my name, as proof of the Governor's? Do you mean to impeach my attestation of Sir William's signature? There is my name, Lady Mary Phips, and I will take the responsibility of this paper being a legal one. If anybody finds fault with you, send him to me, and I will say you did it, in the Governor's absence from town, at my peremptory order." The lady's face glowed, and her eyes flashed with her excitement and determination. "It would be as much as my position is worth to disobey it and me," rejoined Lady Mary. "I will have you out of this place in 3 days' time, if you cast disrespect upon my written name." "There can be no great haste in this matter. Bring the release to morrow, and I will consult authority in the meanwhile," said the keeper pleadingly. "Authority! The Governor's name is authority! I am authority! Who dare you set up beside us? You forget your proper respect and duty, Master Arnold." The keeper was overborne at last. "You will uphold me if I do this thing, Lady Mary?" said he imploringly. "You know me, Master Arnold, and that I never desert my friends. I shall accept the full responsibility of this deed before Sir William and the magistrates, and they cannot order any punishment which he cannot pardon." By this time it had grown quite dark. "Shall I take you anywhere in my carriage?" said Lady Mary, as Dulcibel reappeared with a bundle. "It is not necessary," replied Master Raymond joyfully. "I will not compromise you any further. God forever bless your ladyship. There is not another woman in New England with the spirit and courage to do what you have done this day. And the reader of our history, 100 years to come, as he reads this page, shall cry fervently, God bless the fearless and generous soul of Lady Mary. "Let me know when you are safe," she whispered to the young man, as he stood by her carriage. "Master and Mistress English are now the guests of Governor Fletcher of New York, changing a Boston prison for a governor's mansion. You will be perfectly secure in that province, or in Pennsylvania, or Maryland, or Virginia." And the carriage drove off. It was in that early afternoon of the evening, when the streets in town and city are more deserted than they are for some hours afterwards, everyone being indoors and not come out for visiting or amusement. And so the young man and his companion walked towards the northern estate or part of the town, meeting only one or two persons, who took no special notice of them. "You do not ask where we are going, Dulcibel?" at last said Master Raymond. She could not see the sweet smile on his face, but she could feel it in his voice. "Anywhere with you," the maiden replied in a low tone. "We are going to be married." He felt the pressure of her hand upon his arm in response. "That is, if we can find a minister to perform the ceremony." "That will be difficult, I should think." "Yes, difficult, but not impossible. After getting you out of prison as Lady Mary did, I should not like to call anything impossible." "Lady Mary is an angel." "Yes, one of the kind with wings," replied her companion, laughing. "She has kindly loaned us her wings though, and we are flying away on them." Before long they were at one of the wharves, then on a small boat, then on the deck of the Storm King. "I am better than my word, Captain Tolley." "Aye, indeed you are. And this is the birdie. Fair mistress, the Storm King and his brood are ready to die to shield you from harm." Dulcibel looked wonder out of her clear blue eyes. What did it all mean? She smiled at the Captain's devoted speech. "I do not want anyone to die for me, Captain. I would rather have you sing me a good sea song, such as my father, who is also a sea captain, used to delight me with at home." "Oh, we can do that too," answered the Captain gaily. "I hope we shall have a jolly time of it before we reach our destination. Now, come down into the cabin and see the preparations I have made for you. A sailor's daughter must have the best of sailor's cheer." "One word, Captain," said Master Raymond, as the Captain came up on deck again, leaving Dulcibel to the privacy of her stateroom. "It does not seem fitting that a young unmarried woman should be alone on a vessel like this, with no matron to bear her company." "Sir," said the Captain, "I would have you know that the maiden is as safe from aught that could offend her modesty on the decks of the Storm King, as if she were in her father's house." "Of course she is. I know that well, and mean not the least offence. And she, innocent as she is, has no other thought. But this is a slanderous world, Captain, and we men know who the world must think of her." "Oh, I admit that," said Captain Tolley, somewhat mollified. "We cannot expect of mere landspeople, who put an innocent girl like that into prison for no offence, the gentle behavior towards women that comes naturally from a seaman. But what do you propose?" "To send for one of the Boston ministers, and marry her before we leave port." "Why, of course," replied the Captain. "It is the very thing. Whom shall we send for? The North Church is nearest. How would Master Cotton Mather do?" The young man stood thoughtfully silent for a moment or two. The ministers of South Church and of King's Chapel were more heterodox in all this witchcraft business, but for that very reason he did not wish to compromise them in any way. Besides, he owed a grudge to Master Mather for his general course in sustaining the persecution, and his recent language in particular towards himself. So his lips gradually settled into a stern determination, and he replied, "Master Mather is the very man." "It may require a little ingenuity to get him aboard at this time of the evening," said the Captain, "but I reckon my first mate Simmons can do it, if any one can." Here, Simmons," to the first mate, who was standing near, "you look like a pillar of the church. Go ashore and bring off Master Cotton Mather with you. The wealthy young Englishman is dying, and he cannot pass away from Boston in peace without his ministerial services." "Dying!" ejaculated Master Raymond. "Yes, dying. Dying to get married. And you cannot pass out of Boston harbor in peace without his ministerial services." "Would it do not as well to ask him to come and marry us?" "I doubt it," replied the Captain. "Master Mather is honest in his faith, even if he is bigoted and superstitious, and death cannot be put off like marriage till tomorrow. But take your own course, Simmons, only bring him." "Shall I use force, sir, if he will not come peaceably?" asked the mate coolly. "Not if it will make a disturbance," said his commander. "We do not want to run the gauntlet of the castle's guns as we go out of the harbor. The wind is hardly lively enough for that." "I will go down and tell Dulcibel," said Master Raymond. "It is rather sudden, but she is a maiden of great good sense, and will see clearly the necessity of the case. And as she is an orphan, she has no father or mother whose consent she might consider necessary. But mate," going to the side of the vessel which the boat was just leaving, "not a word as to my name or that of the maiden. That would spoil all." "Aye, aye, sir. Trust me to bring him." And the boat started for the shore, under the vigorous strokes of two oarsmen. Chapter 52. Not quite an hour had elapsed when the sound of oars was again heard, and Captain Tolley, peering through the dark, saw that another form was seated opposite the mate in the stern sheets of the boat. "I thought that Simmons would bring him," said Captain Tolley to the second mate. "Such a smooth tongue as he has. It is a pity he wasn't a minister himself. His genius is half wasted here." "Glad to see you on board the Storm King, Master Mather," was the greeting of the Captain, as the minister was helped up to the deck by the mates. "The Storm King? Why, I was told that it was an English frigate just come into port," said the minister in a surprised voice. "The messenger must have made a mistake," replied the Captain coolly. "You know that landsmen always do get things mixed." "Well, as I am here, no matter. Show me the dying man." "Walk down into the cabin," said the Captain politely. Entering the cabin, which was well lighted, Master Raymond stepped forward. "I am happy to see you, Master Mather. You remember me, do you not?" "Master Raymond, I believe," returned the minister coldly. "Where is the dying man who requires my spiritual ministrations?" "Dying!" laughed the Captain. "How strangely that fellow got things mixed. I said dying to get married, did I not, Master Raymond?" "Of course you did. That is, after you had explained yourself." Master Mather's face looked blank. He did not know what to make of it. "In truth, Master Mather," said the young Englishman, "I was under the necessity of getting married this evening, and thinking over the worshipful minister of Boston town, I singled you out as the one I should prefer to officiate on the happy occasion." "I decline to have anything to do with it," said Master Mather indignantly, turning on his heel, and going off to the door of the cabin. But here a muscular sailor with a boarding pike promptly forbade his passage by putting the pike across the doorway. "What do you mean by barring my way in this manner?" said the minister in great wrath to the Captain. "Have you no reverence for the law?" "Not a particle for Boston law," replied Captain Tolley. "The only law recognized on board the Storm King is the command of its captain. You have been brought here to marry these two young friends of mine, and you will not leave the vessel before you do it, if I have to take you with us all the way to China." Master Mather pondered the matter for a moment. "This is too informal. There are certain preliminaries that are necessary in such case." "Advisable, but I am told not absolutely necessary," replied Master Raymond. "Wait then for an hour or two, and we shall be on the high seas, and out of any jurisdiction," added Captain Tolley. "Who is this maiden? Who gives her away?" asked the minister. "This maiden is Mistress Dulcibel Burton," said Master Raymond, taking her by the hand. She is an orphan, but I give her away," added the Captain. "Dulcibel Burton, the serpent witch!" exclaimed Master Mather. "What is that convict doing here? Has she broken jail?" "Master Mather," said the Captain in an excited tone, "if you utter another word of insult against this innocent and beautiful maiden, I will have you flung overboard to the sharks. So take care of what you say." And the indignant seaman shook his finger in the minister's face warningly. "Master Mather," added Raymond more coolly, "Mistress Burton has not broken jail. She was duly released from custody by Keeper Arnold on the presentation of an official paper by Lady Mary Phips. Therefore your conscience need not be uneasy on that score." "Why are you here then? Why making this haste? It is evident that there is something wrong about it." "Boston has not treated either of us so well that we are very desirous of remaining," replied Master Raymond. "And as we are going together, it is only decorous that we should get married. If you however refuse to marry us, we shall be compelled to take you with us, for the mere presence of such a respected minister will be sufficient to shield the maiden's name from all reckless calumniators." The second mate came to the door of the cabin. "Captain, there is a fine breeze blowing. It is a pity not to use it." "Make all ready, sir," replied the Captain. Then turning to the minister, "There is no particular hurry, Master Mather. You can take the night to think over it. Tomorrow morning probably, if you come to your senses, we may be able to send you ashore somewhere between here and the Capes of Delaware." "This is outrageous!" said Master Mather. "I will hold both of you accountable for it." "It is a bad time to threaten when your head is in the lion's mouth, Master Mather," returned Captain Tolley fiercely. "No one knows but my own men that you ever came on board the Storm King. How do you know that I am not Captain Kidd myself?" The minister's face grew pale. It was no disparagement to his manhood. Even Master Raymond's face grew very serious, for did even he know that this Captain Tolley might not be the renowned freebooter, of whose many acts of daring and violence the wide seas rang? "I would counsel you for your own good to do at once what you will have to do ultimately," said Master Raymond gravely. "I owe you no thanks for anything, but," and the young man laughed as he turned to Dulcibel, "I could never trap even a fox without pitying the animal." Dulcibel went up to the minister and put her hand upon his arm. "Do I look so much like a witch?" she said in a playful tone. "We are told that Satan can enrobe himself like an angel of light," replied Master Mather severely. "I judge you by what I have heard of your cruel deeds." "As you judged the cruel yellow bird that turned out to be only a harmless little chicken," said Master Raymond sarcastically. "Enough of this folly. Will you marry us now or not? If you will, you shall be put ashore unharmed. If you will not, you shall go along with us. Make up your mind at once, for we shall soon be out of Boston harbor." Master Mather had a strong will, and an equally strong won't. But the Philistines were for this time too much for him. That reference to Captain Kidd had frightened him badly. "Stand up and I will marry you, unscrupulous as you both are. It is better that you should be married by legal rights, than allowed to go your own way to destruction." And then, the important ceremony being duly gone through, he pronounced Master Ellis Raymond and Mistress Dulcibel Burton man and wife, the Captain being allowed by Master Raymond to take the first kiss, and acting in the place of the bride's father. "No, not a penny," said the minister, closing his hand against the golden pieces that the groom held out to him. "All I ask is that you comply with your promise, and put me on shore again as soon as possible." "Better take a drink of wine first," said the Captain, filling up a glass and handing it to him. "I will neither break bread nor drink wine on this," he was going to say accursed ship, but the fierce eyes of the possible freebooter were upon him, and said, "on this unhappy vessel." Captain Tolley laughed heartily. "Oh well, good wine never goes begging. The anchor is not up yet, and we will put you off just when you came on. Come along." Without a word of leave taking to the two whom he had joined together, Master Mather followed the Captain. In fact though, Master Raymond and Dulcibel scarcely noted his going, for they were now seated on a small sofa, the arm of the young husband around the shapely waist of his newly made wife, and the minister dismissed from their minds as completely as the wine glass out of which they had just drank. He had answered their purpose, and in the deep bliss of their new relation they thought no more about him. As Master Mather turned to descend to the boat again, not wasting any formal words of leave taking upon the Captain either, the latter grasped him by the arm. "Wait one moment," said Captain Tolley. "You will speak of what has occurred here this evening, Master Mather, or not, at your pleasure. But be careful of what you say, for there is no power on this coast strong enough to protect you against my vengeance." And with a scowl upon his face that would have done injustice to the dreaded Captain Kidd himself, he added in a hoarse, fearful tone the one impressive word, "Beware!" The minister made no reply. It was a day of fierce men and wild deeds, especially on the high seas. Prudence in some positions is far better than valor. "Now, my hearties, let us get out of this harbor as soon as possible," cried the Captain. "I might have held him till we were opposite the castle, and put him ashore there, but it is safer as it is. We have a regular clearance, and he cannot do anything legally under an hour or two at least, while in half an hour we shall be outside, with a stiff breeze like this. Once on the open seas, I fear neither man nor devil." Chapter 53. Whether Master Mather did make any serious effort to prevent the Storm King from leaving the harbor, I am unable to say. But as I find no reference to this affair either in his biography or his numerous works, I am inclined to think that like a wise man he held his peace as to what had occurred, and resolved never to go on board another vessel after nightfall. Certainly no cannon ball cut the waves as the Storm King sailed swiftly past the castle, and no signal was displayed signifying that she must come at once to anchor. And the little trip to New York was as pleasant in all respects as a young couple on a bridal tour could desire, even if the mere relief from the anxieties and threatened dangers of the previous long months had not been of itself a cause of happiness. Arrived at New York, Master Philip English and his wife received them with open arms. Master Raymond had brought letters from England to Governor Fletcher and others, and soon made warm friends among the very best people. There was no sympathy whatever in New York at that time with the witchcraft persecutions in Massachusetts, and all fugitives were received, as in the case of the Englishes, with great sympathy and kindness. Much to my regret at this point, the old manuscript book to which I have been so largely indebted suddenly closes its record of the fortunes of Master and Mistress Raymond. Whether they went to England and took up their residence there among Master Raymond's friends, or found a home in this new world, I am therefore not able with absolute certainty to say. From what I have been able, however, to gather from other quarters, I have come to the conclusion that they were so much pleased with their reception in New York, that Master Raymond purchased an estate on the east side of the Hudson River, where he and the charming Dulcibel lived and loved to a good old age, leaving 3 sons and 3 daughters. If this couple really were our hero and heroine, then the Raymonds became connected through the 3 daughters with the Smiths, the Joneses, and the Browns. In one way, perhaps, the question might be set at rest, were it not too delicate a one for successful handling. There is little doubt that among the descendants of Mistress Dulcibel on the female side, the birthmark of the serpent, more or less distinct, will be found occasionally occurring even now, at the lapse of almost 2 centuries. Therefore, if among the secret traditions of any of the families I have mentioned, there be one relative to this curious birthmark, doubtless that would be sufficient proof that in their veins runs the rich blood of the charming Dulcibel Raymond. Chapter 54. Perhaps before I conclude I should state that the keeper of the Boston bridewell, Master Arnold, was summarily dismissed for accepting the validity of the Governor's signature; but he did not take it very grievously to heart, for Master Raymond, Captain Alden, and others whom he had obliged saw him largely recompensed. Captain Alden, by the way, had fled for concealment to his relatives in Duxbury. Being asked when he appeared there, where he came from, the old captain said he was fleeing from the devil, who was still after him. However, his relatives managed to keep him safely, until all danger was past, both from the devil and from his imps. As for Lady Mary, the indignation of the faithful was hot against her, and finally against Sir William, who could not be made to see in it anything but a very good joke. "You know that Lady Mary will have her own way," he said to Master Mather. "Wives should be kept in due gospel subjection," returned the minister. "Oh yes," rejoined the Governor, smiling; "but I wish you had a wife like Lady Mary, and would try it on her. I think we should hear something breaking." But when Mistress Ann Putnam and others began to "cry out" against Lady Mary as a witch, the Governor waxed angry in his turn. "It is time to put a stop to all this," he said indignantly. "They will denounce me as a witch next." So he issued a general pardon and jail delivery, alike to the 10 persons who were then under sentence of death, to those who had escaped from prison, and to the 150 lying in different jails, and the 200 others who had been denounced for prosecution. It was a fair blow, delivered at the very front and forehead of the cruel persecution, and it did its good work, though it lost Sir William his position, sending him back to England to answer the charges of his enemies, and to die there soon afterwards in his 45th year. When Chief Justice Stoughton, engaged in fresh trials against the reputed witches, read the Governor's proclamation of pardon, he was so indignant that he left his seat on the bench, and could not be prevailed upon to return to it. Neither could he, to the day of his death, be brought to see that he had done anything else than what was right in the whole matter. Not so the jury, which, several years after, confessed its great mistake, and publicly asked forgiveness; nor Judge Sewell, who rose openly in church and confessed his fault, and afterward kept one of the days of execution, with every returning year, sacred to repentance and prayer, seeing no person from sunrise to nightfall, mourning in the privacy of his own room the sin he had committed. Mistress Ann Putnam and her husband both died within the 7 years, as Dulcibel in her moment of spiritual exaltation had predicted. Her daughter Ann lived to make a public confession, asking pardon of those whom she had, she said unintentionally, injured, and died at the age of 35, her grave being one that nobody wanted their loved ones to lie next to. As for the majority of the afflicted circle, they fell as the years went on into various evil ways, one authority describing them as abandoned to open and shameless vice. Master Philip English, after the issue of the Governor's pardon, returned to Salem. 17 years afterwards, he was still trying to recover his property from the officials of the province, of £1,500 seized. He never recovered more than £300, while his wife died in 2 years at the age of 42, in consequence of the treatment to which she had been subjected. Master Joseph Putnam and his fair Elizabeth lived on in peace at the old place, taking into his service the Quaker Antipas upon his release from prison. The latter was always quiet and peaceful, save when any allusion was made to the witches; but he had easy service and good treatment, and was a great favorite with the children, especially with that image of his father, who afterwards became distinguished as the Major General Putnam of Revolutionary fame. As for the presents that had been promised to the afflicted circle, They came to them duly, and from London too, and they were rich gifts also; but such a collection of odd and grotesque articles certainly are not often got together. Master Raymond had commissioned an eccentric friend of his in London to purchase them, and sent them on, acquainting him with the peculiar circumstances. There were yellow birds, and red dragons, and other fantastic animals, birds and beasts; but they came from London, and the "circle" found them just suited to their peculiar tastes; and they always maintained, even in defiance of Mistress Ann, that Master Raymond was a lovely gentleman, and an "afflicted" person himself. It will thus be seen that these Salem maidens were in their day truly esthetic, having that sympathetic fondness for unlovely and repulsive things which is the unerring indication of a daughter of Lilith. End of chapters 51 to 54. And now, in conclusion, some one may ask, did the Province of Massachusetts ever make any suitable atonement for the great wrongs her court of injustice had committed? I answer, never. Massachusetts had never made any adequate atonement, no, not to this day. The General Assembly 18 years afterwards, did indeed pass an act reversing the convictions and attainders in all but 6 of the cases, and ordering the distribution of the paltry sum of £578 among the heirs of 24 persons, as a kind of compensation to the families of those who had suffered. But this was all nothing, or next to nothing. Perhaps the day will sometime come when the cry of innocent blood from the rocky platform of Witch Hill shall swell into sufficient volume to be heard across the chasm of 2 centuries. Then on some high pedestal where the world can see it, Massachusetts shall proclaim in enduring marble her penitence and ask a late forgiveness of the 20 innocent men and women whom she so terribly wronged. And as all around, and even the mariner far at sea, shall behold the gleaming shaft, standing where stood the rude gallows of 2 centuries ago, they shall say with softening eyes and glowing cheeks, "It is never too late to right a great wrong, and Massachusetts now makes all the expiation that is possible to those whom her deluded forefathers dishonored and persecuted and slew." End of Dulcibel, by Henry Peterson. Read by Elaine Webb, Bristol, England.